Hello, people. I'm going to be reading not. I'm not going to be reading shipping handling today. I'm going to be reading something a bit more sad. It's not probably. It's probably just as long as the other one, but I'm going to read it. And then an entire chapter, and everything else is going to be an entire chapter. Even this is probably looks like it might take some 30 minutes. And I have some stuff plugged in. I don't know if it'll work. I need to get like some better music stuff because I can't really get comfortable in this chair. I mean, I'm literally like 2 inches off the floor on this chair. Okay. This is written by I'm just another brony. Chapter 1. Applejack and A-N-I Applejack. An introduction. Okay. This is Friendship is bad and Friendship is tragic, chapter 1. It was still early. The sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon. Applejack let a big yawn escape her. She was still tired since she hadn't slept much the night before. She threw her saddle pack over her shoulder and quietly shut the apple barn doors, making sure not to wake the other sleeping ponies. She let out a long sigh and saw her breath get carried away in the cold breeze. I sure could use a smile today and miss you so much, Applejack thought to herself. She knew she had a hard day ahead of her. Today marked the 3rd year since Pinkie Pie's tragic death. She began walking down an old dirt trail facing the rising sun and disappeared into the orchard. It was approaching noon when Applejack finally arrived at the old Ponyville cemetery. She walked up to Pinkie's headstone and brushed the old leaves off with her tail. Here lies Pinkamena Diane Pie, Pinkie. She was a highlight in every pony's life. She always knew how to make a friend smile. She truly was the best friend a pony could ask for. Applejack dropped her saddle pack on the ground next to Pinkie's headstone and pulled out a small blanket. She spread it out and laid down on it. A lot's changed since you've been gone, Pinkie. No pony's the same. Applejack laid her head down into the basket and began to remember all the smiles and laughter she shared with Pinkie. Even though she was alone, she tried to keep her tears back. She knew Pinkie wouldn't want her to feel this way, so she did her best to hide it. Looky here, Pink. I brought you something. Applejack reached into her bag with her teeth and pulled out an old photograph of them as young fillies and playing in sweet apple acres. What? I is confused. Maybe before this is probably not canon, but I'd always prefer stuff to make sense. And I was like, what the heck just happened? Found her earlier in the old cellar. Just another day when I was cleaning her out. It sure brought some good memories, and a few bad ones. Applejack stood up and looked around for a minute, then up at the sun. She noticed she had been there for a few hours, and was still alone. What? Was every pony just too busy to show up bothering to an old friend? Applejack was outraged at the lack of ponies who showed up to pay their respects to Pinkie Pie. But then again, Ponyville is a dying city. I guess I really can't blame them. Things really have changed around here. Pinkie, I'm almost glad you didn't have to watch your home fall apart the way the rest of us did. It really changed us a lot. I'd give you just about anything to go back to the good old days. The days when you still had some pony to make us smile. Applejack laid on her back, staring up at the gray, cloudy sky. She began to think about the day that changed Ponyville forever. She closed her eyes and fell into an even deeper in thought. Come on, Big Mac. Last one to fill up the apple barrel is a sour apple. Applejack called out playfully. Big Macintosh and Applejack were busy harvesting the apples as quickly as possible. The Pegasi were also hard at work, preparing a storm. Not just any storm. The storm that was the final storm of the year before winter. The final storm is always the biggest, most fearsome storm of the year. I feel the wind starting to pick up. Let's hurry and take what we got back to the apple cellar. Applejack looked up at the sky and saw black swirling clouds of lightning. This looks worse than last year's storm, don't you think, Big Mac? Yup, sure does, Big Macintosh replied. They quickly rushed the apples into the safety of the apple cellar. There they met Granny Smith, and a very nervous Apple Bloom. It's about time you got back here. I was getting worried about you two, Apple Bloom yelled at them, relieved that made it back before the storm arrived. You know we need to save as many apples as we can before the storm blows them all to the ground, dirtying them all up. These apples are our livelihood, you know, Applejack explained. They heard large amounts of rain and wind begin to hit the door of the cellar. Crackling thunder shook the apples off the pile and on the ground. Applejack could sense that something was wrong, but she didn't say anything to keep Apple Bloom from worrying about than she already was. She noticed how that cellar door was shaking due to the powerful gusts of wind, so she led the other ponies to the back of the cellar and warned them to keep their heads down if the cellar door had just happened to swing open. There, lying on the floor, was an old scrapbook she and Pinky had thrown together when they were just a couple of young fillies. Apple Bloom picked out a picture, giggled at the thought of her big sis ever having been so young. Large hail began to fall, violently crashing into the door. Apple Bloom dropped the book and began to tightly hug Applejack's back leg. Now don't you fret, Sugar Cube. This little old storm will be over before you know it. Something just doesn't feel right about this storm. It's been going on far too long now, hasn't it? Big Macintosh said quietly to Applejack. She knew he was right, but didn't know what to say. Suddenly, the cellar door broke free from its hinges and flew into the air. Apple Bloom let out a terrified shriek and buried her face into Applejack's tail. Every pony just keep their heads down! Applejack quickly stood and crouched over Apple Bloom. Big Macintosh stood strongly in front of Granny Smith. Applejack felt the rain and the wind pelt her flank. It stung, but she was still thankful that it had stopped hailing. Debris and dirt filled the cellar as the fierce wind slammed into the ponies. The only thing keeping Applejack from collapsing was her will to protect her little sis. I'm scared, big sis. Apple Bloom was soaking wet and shivering. She curled herself into a little ball in an attempt to get warm. But there's no need to be scared, little one. There's no way and no how I'll ever let anything happen to you. I promise you that, little sis. Through the pain, she mustered up an encouraging smile from Apple Bloom. The wind finally began to die down. The rain slowed, then stopped. The ponies all walked outside to see a devastated Sweet Apple Acres. Apple Bloom looked up into the sky and saw a huge rainbow in between the breaking storm and clouds. It almost seemed as if they were pushing them further apart. Wow, that's some kind of rainbow, Applejack thought. She felt a sting on her flank, looked back, and saw a few small scrapes and cuts from the twigs and pebbles blown into her by the wind. She took another look at the growing rainbow and felt an unexplainable sadness within her chest. With a lump in her throat, she told Apple Bloom to get inside so she could dry off and warm up. Before going inside, Applejack looked back. The rainbow was gone, but the sadness was still there. About an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Applejack stood up and gave Big Macintosh a questioning look. He simply shrugged. She walked over to the door and opened it to see Twilight Sparkle standing there with tears in her eyes. Applejack still had a painful lump in her throat, which was now keeping her from talking at all. Something terrible happened, Twilight said with a breaking voice. Applejack looked at her with her heartbroken expression on her face. It's Pinky. There was an accident. She's no longer with us. Twilight spoke with tears pouring down her face. Applejack took a few steps back and stood there in disbelief. Dozens of questions filled her mind. What happened? How did it happen? Why did this happen? But what came out was, where is she? Tell me where she is. Twilight looked down and shook her head. Without an answer, Applejack pushed past Twilight Sparkle and ran towards Ponyville. She arrived at the outskirts of the city, where she met a small crowd of mourning ponies. Among them was Rarity, I hate dyslexia, who immediately ran out and embraced her. Applejack looked past to see an area taped off, and a few officers' ponies taking notes. Don't go over there, Applejack. I'm certain you'll regret it. No pony should endure witnessing such a tragedy. Rarity's words did not stop Applejack from running to the scene. She saw the small pink pony lying and covered in dirt and debris. She tried to cross the crime scene tape, but was immediately stopped by the officer pony. Please, ma'am, remain on the side of the crime scene. We don't need any evidence contaminated in art, or our investigation delayed. Crime scene, evidence, investigation? These words were racing through Applejack's mind. Crime scene investigation. Are you saying some pony did this to Pinky? No pony could hurt her. Why would they? Who could do this? Rarity walked up behind her, nuzzled her, and urged her back into town. Come sit with me. We need to talk, Applejack. I'll tell you everything. Applejack opened her eyes just in time to see a falling leaf land on her nose. She looked at it cross-eyed for a minute. Well, would you look at that? It's getting dark soon. It's been a wonderful and a beautiful day today, Pinky. I'm glad I could share it with a friend, with you. You know, you're just about the only friend I got left. Thanks for always being there when I needed you the most. I wish I was there for you. I wish I could have helped. Applejack packed up her bag and began her journey home, finding herself lost in her own memories. Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is probably coming soon.